dress shoes and cycle kit. It's a look, I tell you. Now, the good news is I did manage to find my cycle shoes, so I'm not having to do this in my Chelsea boots. So this week, as you can see, we are in the Forest of Bowland, the Ribble Valley, and we're going for a much more difficult route this week than we did last week in Lincolnshire. You see lots of other cyclists out there. It's a gorgeous day. As you can see here, we have some significant climbs today. We're actually going to be going over 1,254 metres, which is over 4,100 foot. It's going to be our first hilly route, and our first hilly route of the year is actually going to be harder than any of the routes we did last year. And the reason we're doing this is really to get some kind of feel for the JOGLE. No matter where you go, there's always a door. Now, we're starting off quite shallow, but it is a lot harder than I expected, it's fair to say. Learning the hard way about being in the right gear going up hills, in the top cog, in the lowest gear thinking you've had it, standing up to cycle. It's exhausting. It's even harder then when you throw it in at the low and you're just spinning. So, take a few seconds to catch my breath. Start again, I think. And on top of my woes, my wife actually had an issue with her front derailleur, which meant that she was stuck in the middle cog. She actually has a triple on that Specialized bike. I absolutely hate triples for that very reason, that they do tend to get a little bit sticky in my experience. At least she was stuck in the middle, not on the high or the low. That would have made this almost impossible or incredibly slow. Now, it's quite hard to capture the steepness of hills, even with an Insta360. But as you can see, my wife's struggling there with her gear selector. It was quite harsh. Now, the reason, obviously, for getting into the hills as soon as we can this year is to give us a bit more of a realistic expectation of the JOGLE, or Le JOGLE, Lancashire John Groats, as we're going to be doing it in June, July time. And to see how we're going to cope. So 4,000 foot is around about our hardest day, though obviously it's going to be a much longer day than what we have here today. And the best thing, of course, about going up hills is coming back down the other side. As I've already mentioned, the weather was spectacular. It's actually better than it is now. I mean, I've got fingerless gloves, sleeveless arms. Couldn't ask for any more. Start of March. Long may it continue. Now, the roads, although they do look a little bit rough on the verge, weren't actually too awful. They're certainly no worse than being in the towns. And it was made up for by the lack of traffic. The only thing that we really encountered quite a lot of were motorcyclists. Coming into a motorcycle mecca there. You've got a pub there surrounded by all the people on the motorbikes. And there you have the cyclist on a park bench. Team park bench, that's what I say. So the hardest part about this route was that you were literally going uphill, going downhill, straight back up a hill. There was no real level elements to this entire route, which, as I say, is probably incredibly good training. So coming up to our first rise, or first serious drop, which is good. It's a 12%. It doesn't look like it in the graph, but it is quite significant. It kind of plays a little bit more when you see some of the other drops we've got coming up. But you do get some good speed. I actually managed to clock around about 46 miles an hour on a later one. Coming into the foresty bit of the Forest of Bowland, was quite surprised actually, not really knowing much about the Forest of Bowland other than some of the tourist sites. There aren't very many trees, it's mostly heathland. Or certainly the section we rode was mostly heathland. But spectacular views from up here. So coming up on our first major hill, coming up to the summit here, and I'll drop back down the other side. Now this is where I actually managed to clock 46 miles an hour, and there goes a motorbike straight past me. Question is, can I catch him up? I think the immediate answer is not a chance. Now the wind up here was quite severe, as you can probably hear. Now all of this so far has been pretty much on gravity. But the interesting thing was that I was starting to catch up with that motorcyclist, so the next question came, can I actually catch him up? Let's see. Now, unfortunately, the wind gust that caught me on that last corner, I seriously started looking down, as you can see. I thought something had gone significantly wrong with my bike, which meant that I had to drop off. I mean, the chances of me catching were pretty unlikely. The funny thing was that just over that rise he stopped, so I could have made a really impressive video if I'd carried on. But never mind. It's not all about the racing. Bit of sheep herding. We're coming up to the second peak now. I found out that actually stopping for a couple of minutes and giving yourself a bit of breath did actually allow the lactic acid to drop down and carry on, which was probably my biggest fear of all of this, is that I know that once you get lactic acid in your muscles, you're generally knackered from a weight perspective, but it seems that giving yourself just a moment's breath does make a huge difference. You can carry on, although obviously not as hard as you were before. And heading into the village of West Bradford and on into Waddington towards our final destination. Unfortunately, the end was all uphill, which is never the best way to end. But anyway, until next time.